right now on Higher Journeys Radio with Alexis Brooks. Many, if not most of us know that phenomena of all kinds is real and experienced by people the world over every day. But just where do these anomalies of reality exist? Do they live in our world, outside of it, or on the borders of reality? A gap in space, time, and dimension that can't be measured by the instruments we use today. I had a most fascinating discussion about all sorts of strange phenomena with the authors of a book by the same name, Phenomena: Harnessing Your Psychic Powers. Trish and Rob MacGregor have been documenting the world of the unusual for more than 30 years, and in that time they've covered some broad territory. In this talk, you'll hear about some of the amazing accounts that they share in their book, and even some that they've never shared publicly before. I am so pleased to welcome today two people who I refer to as the dynamic duo of Synchronicity, who both carry an encyclopedic knowledge of all things we loosely refer to as high strangeness, and that's Rob and Trish MacGregor. You know, I was listening to the last show we did together, guys, which was done back in January of 2017, nearly 3 years ago. Yeah, and in my intro to that show, I remarked that in 2017, I remarked that it had been 3 years previous in January of 2014 that I first had you on the show. Now, I certainly hadn't consciously planned to have you on every 3 years, but that's how it's worked out thus far. So let's start with this. Since you are the synchro experts, can you explain what's with the three guys? I mean, come on, coincidence or something more? What's going on?
I think it's fascinating that you have a record of this.
Yeah, I do.
To me, whenever I run across sequences of numbers, my first frame of reference is usually the I Ching because I've been using it for years. But three, so this has been 2 3s, right? Three and 3, 2014 and okay. So that's 33. All right. 33 in the I Ching is a hexagram called retreat. Now, I don't like to think about your show as a retreat. Well, I guess it's a retreat in a sense. Yeah, okay, we'll use the other definition of retreat. Okay. I like that. It's a retreat in the sense that we come here and we talk about the things we're interested in. How's that?
That sounds good to me. But I'm thinking, is it 2 3s or are we at 3 3s? So we have, this is your third appearance, okay?
Oh,
we have your third appearance. Then you were on 3 years previous, and when we spoke then, it was 3 years previous to that. 3 times.
Okay.
3 times with 3 years in between each.
That's interesting.
That is.
In numerology, 33 is...
But it's 3 3s.
Yeah.
3 3 3.
33 is related to a higher plane of reality.
It's also related to, during one trip, we had this experience where we heard this boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
it was like a wrecking ball. And
it was three threes of it was like spirit contact because we were staying at this hotel that happened to be right outside of a cemetery. Actually, we thought the center of the hotel, it had like 3 sides in the center, but we thought it was a garden. Well, it turned out to be a cemetery, and our room overlooked it. And we went in there and talked to the grave digger one time, and I picked up this rock, which I probably shouldn't have done, took it back to the room. And so that night, we had gone to bed about 11 o'clock or so. Megan was in the back room, sound asleep, and it was like, am I awake or am I sleeping? I heard this boom, 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 like a wrecking ball hitting the side of the house 3 times. 3, and after the third set of 3, I sat up, and Trish sat up simultaneously. We looked at each other. We both said, "Did you hear that?" Yeah, we
but
both.
It was really uplifting.
It was a very uplifting experience. It just was very energizing. And then the television came. We hadn't even been watching television that evening. It was something going on.
It's energizing, like your show. How's that?
So we've gone from retreat to energizing. There's a little creepy in there. Okay, so we've got it all there. Listen, this is a perfect segue. So is it any surprise that these two, I call the dynamic duo of all things high strangeness, we're going to talk about a book that they just co-authored called Phenomena, Harnessing Your Psychic Powers. Now, this is certainly a book chock full of amazing anecdotes. You just heard one. These guys have plenty. Some are your own stories of incredible firsthand accounts of the unexplainable. But in this book, I'm going to quote you guys. You say, quote, "We all have psychic abilities to one degree or another. We can tap into a collective soup of knowledge and wisdom that expands who we are and what we can do. We aren't all Marvel superheroes, but the potential exists in each and every one of us to become more than who we currently are," end quote. Now, listen, if this is the case, and I agree with you, I think in addition, more individuals are not only having more of these sorts of experiences, but they're starting to resonate with the idea of an unknown phenomenon, a spectrum of phenomena that's clearly a part of our reality. But guys, if this is so, then why is there still this vehement denial on the part of mainstream science, particularly, that these phenomena exists? What do you think?
Yeah, that's part of the frustrating part. Although there are scientists who are looking into this stuff, like Rupert Sheldrake,
Yes,
the British
we're going to
biologist,
talk about that. Mm-hmm.
Dean Radin, Bernard Bateman, the psychiatrist who's at the University of Virginia, who's studying synchronicity. I mean, there are people who understand all this and who are looking into it seriously, or they're researching it.
And a lot of the older scientists are tied to the old paradigm. They're not going to let it go because it would change the way we think about everything if telepathy, if psychokinesis, if seeing the future, precognition, if all that was accepted, then they would have to rethink everything. And they go out the door onto other worlds and are replaced by younger people who are more open. Things are going to change. It's just
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, and it could change very fast.
Yeah, but I think it's happening regardless of the old vanguard and regardless of the the old and you talk about people like Sheldrake, who I love, and I want to talk about him as well and his telepathy work as well as other things. Many Dean Radin, one of my favorites, Charles Tart, who I haven't heard his name in many years. I was in contact with him years ago. So there are folks that are not necessarily kids that have been really the advocates.
That's true.
Yeah,
it's not just age,
right?
It's by interest and focus is the important thing for developing your own abilities as well. Sure. If you don't have the interest, you're not going to develop your skills. And if you're so skeptical that you don't believe in anything out of the ordinary, out of the mainstream, then you're not going to. Your beliefs are going to be reinforced by your lack of experiences.
Absolutely. And you know. We had found these interesting set of statistics that there was a survey done by Baylor University in 2005 that concluded that only 15% of Americans believed in any facet of the paranormal. Then you skip ahead 12 years to another one done in 2017 by Chapman University, and it was 75%. So that tells you where the population is going.
Yeah, the Chapman U one, 75% believe in some aspect of the paranormal or UFOs. So, the two surveys could have been done in a little different way, so they might not be totally comparable, but it shows such a dramatic increase that there's got to be something going on there.
Well, I was going to say, what do you think this is due to?
I think part of it's social media, podcasts, radio shows like yours. There's just more information is more accessible. I think that's part of it. But also I think that I'm hoping that the consciousness of humanity as a whole is expanding and opening, being more receptive and more heart-centered.
Right, and you can also see it in shamanism, development of Western shamanism over recent decades, where shamanism differs from standard religion in that you have a priest, in a sense, the shaman, but you have to participate in
the rituals.
Yeah, in the rituals, where standard religion, establishment religion, the priest is the person, the in-between person between the hierarchy of the god, whatever, and yourself. where shamans lead you, guide you into that spirit world where you experience it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. The experiential versus the observation, or just being told what it is, that how it is. That's a huge topic in and of itself. So maybe there are more having experiences, and all of the things that we're talking about combined. The fact that maybe more people are having more experiences, consciousness is expanding, and it's becoming more ubiquitous by virtue of these social media, where we're able to talk about it. We have far more channels, literally and figuratively, to discuss it. So yeah.
Well, the people who experience these things are no longer so reluctant to talk about it. Because before, back in the 80s, if you had some sort of UFO experience or whatever it was, you knew that if you told anybody about it, they would look at you like you were nuts.
Sure, at a minimum.
At a minimum, right?
Yeah.
So that's changed.
Absolutely. Also. It's a good thing. Let's talk about telepathy. Yeah. We were talking about Mr. Sheldrick. I love him, the biologist. Let's talk about how some of the work that he's done as it relates to telepathy. And you cover this idea in your book, in particular in the introduction, where you do cite the work of Sheldrick as it relates to his experiments on telephone telepathy. Now, through his experience, he says that both telephone and email telepathy are quite common. With this whole idea of technology, Trish and Rob, quite literally becoming a medium for all sorts of phenomena, telepathy not being the least of them, there seems to be something quite curious going on with how the electromagnetic spectrum and our own bioelectric field may be interacting with technology. We talked about this offline just a little while ago. We shared, everybody out there, we shared a couple of anomalous things, let's just say, via images and technology that we believe has to do with capturing some form of spirit energy. What's going on here with technology and us as electric beings?
That's a good, I find this absolutely fascinating. I mean, when you think that the iPhone only came onto the market in 2007. So we're talking about in a period of 12 years, this kind of technology has really transformed everything. It's transformed how people communicate, and it's also transformed how the dead communicate with us, I think.
Okay.
We tell a story of a woman who has 3 sons, and one of them had died at a young age, 18 or 19, and her other sons had moved away. And then she had this reunion. The sons were back, and because they came one at a time to visit her, but rarely had they come together. And she said, "My family is back." And on her phone popped up on the screen was a poem that she had written in the aftermath of the death of her son about how she loved him, how close they were. And it was just startling to her because there was no reason for that poem to suddenly pop up. She hadn't looked at it in a long time, and suddenly there it was. And then she wrote, "I knew we were all together, all my sons were here with us."
Similar to what the story you were telling us before.
Yeah, about what I showed you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
This is really something maybe we can come back and have a whole talk on. I think it's worth having. And by the way, journeyers, I call my audience the journeyers. Let us know some of the stories that some of the experiences that you have had in which you feel that something paranormal has interacted through technology. I have a feeling there's a lot out there. I mean, could it be that when I say we, let's just say discarnate energy, once it leaves the physical form, because it was in the physical form electric, we're bioelectric, we're electric beings. Could it be that the electromagnetic spectrum that we're interacting with is easier to manipulate? There's something, it seems, that has to do with that interaction.
Maybe so. That's an interesting thought too.
Yeah, this goes all the way back to the 60s with a Russian name. His last name was Radaev.
Yes, I know.
Experiment with radio and finding space between 2 channels and recording, sending out questions or comments and getting answers that seemed to come from the spirit world. And he had a huge book about
electric voice phenomenon.
Yeah, that's Konstantin Rodov, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Yes, very well known in that area. Yeah, I think it's been worked on for quite some time. It's said that Thomas Edison, close to his
Right.
dying, was working on some form of apparatus that would
Sure.
allow the recording
Mhm.
of
Yes.
discarnate voices. So this has been
And
this is not a new discussion.
Edison's stuff was disappeared after his death because the family members didn't want to
Associate his name with.
sully his history with this paranormal. So that was interesting. So there is something out there somewhere among the family members that have that material.
Fascinating. So much it's hidden. Well, listen, in your book, you have examples of individuals, this is an interesting thing, who seem to have a predisposition to paranormal experiences. Now, I've covered this on the show before where I've asked the question, why is it that some people tend to magnetize paranormal events? I'd like to throw that question out to you both. Why is it that some people are constantly attracting what we call high strangeness into their lives while others live otherwise normal lives with little to no anomalous interruption to their day-to-day? Why do you think some people?
Well, I think some people are just predisposed to this strangeness.
Like
But
you,
also,
like you,
yeah,
both.
I mean, I was born with this,
Yeah.
I was fascinated by this stuff since I was a kid. But other people, I think, sometimes people who are more skeptical have to be kind of worked into it through an anomalous experience themselves. And after that, they're more open, they're more receptive.
Yeah. And when Trish and I met, we were in a space where we were surrounded by non-believers or people who were not interested as well. And so we had both been reading the Jane Roberts Seth books, and didn't know anybody else who had any interest in these books, who ever even knew about them, who had read it or read any of them. So it was just like a quiet preoccupation we each had. And then we met and said, "Oh, you read those books too?" And that
I love it.
kind of set up
Yeah,
our
because
relationship.
Seth's stuff was very philosophical and it encompassed a lot. I think there were 20 books that she channeled.
That's right.
But yeah, and it's trying to digest all the Seth material all by yourself is difficult. So when I met Rob, it was like a total feast to me. Oh, let's talk about Seth.
So funny. I knew that the two of you were students of Seth, as am I. I've been reading for years, and I think of Rob Butts, her husband, who died quite a few years after. And there's such a incredible spectrum of work, even outside of Seth Speaks and the Nature of Personal Reality.
Right.
You've got these early sessions that I own. I still have not dove into them because it's deep stuff. It's not, these are not just, easy page turners. You really have to sit and kind of process some of the concepts that he's saying, and yet so much resonated with me. See, you guys I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there was also, I think, a set of 6 books that, I may be wrong about this, that were written while she was ill, and she had been hospitalized for a year with rheumatoid arthritis and all the complications. But that's fascinating too, because Seth still came through.
Yeah. And we felt a special closeness to them. We never met them, but my name is Rob. His name is Rob. Trish's maiden name is Jane Schutz. And then we had an article that was published in Fate magazine on psychic detectives, and at the end of the magazine was Jane.
The end of the
Roberts. The end of the article was Jane Roberts' obituary, and we hadn't known.
That was so eerie.
That is really interesting. Well, as I think of the two of you, and I've known you for quite some time now, I can see, certainly with the interest, the mutual interest that you share, I was just going to say, how blessed are you both to be able to share that very unique interest and love of something, and you can share it with each other as they did. So, well, let me ask you, Trish, have you ever channeled?
I think, this is interesting. I also write fiction, and I think that when you're writing fiction, especially fiction or of any sort, you sometimes tap into something. You tap into that collective soup. For instance, back in I think it was 2005, I wrote a novel called Category 5 that took place on a fictional island of Tango Key, and it was a Category 5 storm devastated the island. They lost electricity, and about 2 weeks before, I think it was about 3 weeks before the book came out, Katrina happened, Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana. And my editor called me and she goes, Trish, you got to go on some radio shows. They're desperate for people who know stuff about hurricanes. I said, wait a minute. I wrote a novel. I'm no expert on hurricanes. I mean, I've done a lot of research on it. But I was on probably 40 or 50 shows in 3 days because people needed information, you know. It was based on my research. So I said, okay. But back then I encountered a lot of people, not a lot, but some radio hosts who were just vehemently opposed to climate change. That had nothing to do with climate change, you know.
Right.
But as far as your question about channeling, neither Trish nor I are channelers in the mainstream sense or the traditional sense of, you know, just taking dictation. And because of our creative work, I guess, I don't think we'd be satisfied just taking dictation from the spirit world, you know. we want to interpret it and play with it.
Right.
So I think that is probably it. You know, I think we'd find that boring, just day after day, just taking dictation like that and not even being really aware of what we're doing.
Right. Well, I think there's so many forms of channeling that, and you make a good point, Trish, being a fiction writer, I dare say, and me as a nonfiction writer, I've had moments in which I really felt something was coming through me that wasn't from me. So channeling can happen in myriad ways. And, you know, it's so funny. I was just thinking about this today as I was listening to a lecture that mentioned Nikola Tesla and talking about how he admitted at a particular talk, I think an award he was receiving many years ago, of course, how he was not necessarily doing the inventing of certain technology, but was rather given it in the sleep state and would wake up with copious notes that he didn't remember taking. So how much of what we're creating is coming from original thought to begin with? We just don't recognize it that way.
Right.
So
that's a good point. I mean, it doesn't just have to be writing. It can be any kind of
anything. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
And information coming through dreams as well, like Einstein's experience with a dream that led to his theory of reality. He dreamed that relativity. He dreamed that a line of cows were near an electrified fence that wasn't electrified at the moment, but then the farmer was at the far end and turned it on, and what Einstein saw was that all the cows jumped back simultaneously, but then in the dream he talks to the farmer and he said, no, what I saw was they jumped one at a time as the electric power went through the chains. So that's where his original idea of relativity.
Because he said it depends on where you are related to the movement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well known to these, quote, original thinkers that they're interacting with phenomena, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk about the power of the hypnagogic state. I always stumble. Say, is it hypnagogic or hypnagogic? It's hypnagogic, I believe. This is a particularly powerful state for me, that which I think we all have, that occurs somewhere between wakefulness and sleeping. Now, you open the book, Phenomena, telling the story of Rob. I love the story, who, while working on a manuscript back in, I believe, 2000, was in such a state, kind of found himself really sleepy and in that in-between state, probably from exhaustion. And Rob, you got a sudden vision of Trish's mom, who, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe at the time was going into hospice. Is that right? Or in hospice?
Well, it was, she had Alzheimer's, and she had, they had called some weeks earlier and said, we think your mother has broken her hip. We're taking her to ER. Well, it turned out her hip had dissolved. And because of Alzheimer's, they couldn't do the surgery because you have to be present enough to understand what the therapy is. So, for a hip replacement. So she was being moved. She'd been in this nursing home for about 3 weeks, and she was being moved that day into hospice. And that's when.
Right. And this vision of her, she seemed very much alive and, just like she had been in the past, and it was like she waved goodbye and left.
And about 5 seconds later, the phone rang, and it was the nursing home saying she had just passed.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
But
It's
you,
startling. I've had experiences like that with people at the time of their passing, or in one case it was a while after the man's passing, but they came to me in that hypnagogic state, and like a cousin of mine died of brain cancer, and I knew he was very ill, but I wasn't really in close touch with him for quite a while. But suddenly I saw him, and he seemed very alive and energetic, and he just looked at me and says, "What's happening?" Smiled and disappeared, and my sister called the next morning and said he had died.
fascinating. We know these are very, very common, but I think the key in your book that you bring up is being in this sort of twilight state of sleep, this hypnagogic or hypnagogic state. It's fascinating, guys. What are your thoughts about how we can proactively work with this sort of state? I know answers have come to me. So I'll tell you a story if I have time about a song that came to me in a hypnagogic state. But I want to ask you both, can we work with this state proactively to get some answers to stuff we're going through? Not just seeing people that are passing, but beyond that.
I think you can. I mean, I think you can give, let's say you're on the verge of falling asleep and you give yourself a suggestion. Okay, I would like an answer to such and such, or some guidance to such and such. And I think that when you do that and you start to drift off, 9 times out of 10, you get something, an image or a voice or, a song, something. But you just have to wake up enough to jot it down and to remember it.
And to
And
remember.
also,
Yeah.
you can reach that state also through meditation, just getting deep and just, but staying aware, staying conscious, but entering, and your body becomes almost like it's asleep, but your mind is still aware, and that's when these images appear. I see them all the time. I don't know who these people are that just pop up, and
Well, tell us about that, Rob. You have that. You tell me about that. I want to hear about that.
yeah. Just about 2 hours ago, I was sitting at my computer, and I didn't have a whole lot of sleep last night, and I was kind of in that state. And there was this little kid. I could see him very clearly. He had dark skin but blue eyes and kind of reddish hair, and like he was maybe four years old or so, and looking at me. And then
this is a new story to me. He didn't tell me this.
This just
Breaking
happened.
news. Breaking news.
Yeah, really.
And then suddenly he disappeared and is replaced at the same time by a woman who I thought might be his mother, who is a woman in her mid to late 20s, and she had a baseball cap on sideways, not backwards or forward, but sideways. And it was like she was replacing. I was kind of curious about him, wanted more, and then she kind of just stepped in and replaced him, said, "I'm here." I don't know what this means.
Were they speaking, Rob, or just observing you?
Yeah, no speaking at all. Just
that's
vision.
fascinating.
And were they aware of me, and where did they come from? I don't know.
Did it seem as if they were looking at you?
Yeah, they seem to be. Yeah, they seem to be aware of me.
Well, see, this is this interdimensional stuff,
Yeah.
This is string theory. The string theory in action.
Really fascinating. I'm thinking of a dear friend of mine who, for years, would have, and I think she still does, when she's in that hypnagogic state, invariably, will have this barrage of individuals showing up, and they're just observing her. She will only see head and neck, typically, maybe sometimes to the torso, because she has observed lots of times they're wearing period clothing. They're coming from different time periods,
Wow.
all different types of people, and they just come in and replace one after the other after the other. And she says it's actually kind of calming to her. It helps her to go to sleep, but it happens all the time.
Well, the only I had one experience back in, I think it was 2001. I went to an Eric Pearl workshop. It was a seminar that he gave, teaching people his reconnective healing.
Right.
So in the workshop, you had to pair up with a stranger. So this, and no physical touching is involved. His technique is all hand movements, very specific hand movements. So this woman started working on me, and all of a sudden, I saw a beam of light shoot out of the top of my head, went through the roof, of this huge auditorium or whatever it was we were in. And at the top, there were 3 distinctive little aliens looking down this beam of light, watching everything. So I thought, okay, that was really interesting. I don't know what it means. However, skip ahead 4 years. In 2005, we had a whole series of hurricanes back to back. And I think it was Hurricane Francis, which wasn't even, I think it was maybe a Cat 1 if it was a hurricane at all, but it was really windy and it was a monsoon. And I remember laying in bed, Rob was asleep, the animals were asleep, Megan was asleep, I was the only one awake, laying in bed listening to this wind. I thought, oh my God, when is this thing going to stop? I was afraid the roof was going to blow off. So I shut my eyes briefly, and the same thing happened again. The beam of light shot out at the top of my head. At the top of it were these 3 little aliens looking down, and then I promptly fell asleep. And it's never happened again.
Huh. Wow.
So I don't know what things like that mean, but it was comforting.
It was comforting? Really? Okay. It
Really,
wasn't jarring.
Yeah.
We'll have to explore that one. Twice it happened. And were these the same beings, you think?
Yeah, they were.
Interesting. Do you believe they were actually there, or was it some sort of symbolism?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there definitely was something that came out of the top of my head, because the top of my head felt like it blew off when that beam of light went out.
And it's interesting that there were 3, because the number 3 in aliens comes about often in stories.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
About abduction. It's always 3.
I'm aware of that. I'm very much aware of that, actually. Yeah. Indeed. Yes.
But that's one of the people who do this research kind of check out whether the story is true. How many aliens were there?
Right.
Because when they say 3, it seems to be clicking on to something.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. I included some of that in my work as well. Very interesting. Well, here we go with 3 again, right? Maybe we can go back to the beginning of the conversation and infuse another meaning into why you come on every 3 years for the 3rd time.
Yeah. Also to me, 3 is also a number of, it's about spiritual things.
Sure.
The Trinity.
The Trinity.
Yeah, the Trinity.
Yeah. Let's go back to this idea of telepathy, guys. Now, this is something that, Trish, I really want you to weigh in on. I know that besides being an extraordinary writer and teller of stories about these sorts of phenomena, you, my dear, are an exquisite astrologer. And you and I have had some conversations about the language of the stars. I would like to know, Trish, if planetary positions and alignments can influence the potency, or the lack thereof, maybe, of telepathic communication. I mean, is there a time where one might want to practice sending telepathic messages according to planetary alignment, or moon cycles, retrogrades?
Well, not during retrogrades, that's for sure.
Not during retrogrades, okay.
But that may not be true, because a Mercury retrograde, yes, it screws up communication and, electronics and that kind of thing. But also during a retrograde, people you've known in your life but haven't seen for a while tend to crop up. Old friends come back into your life. Also, sometimes old issues resurface. But related to your question about telepathy, I believe that the trine is probably the most powerful aspect for telepathy, because that's when 2 or more planets are connected at 120 degrees. So let's say you're an earth sign. Let's say you're a Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And on a particular day, Mercury in Capricorn, or Mercury is in Taurus. And then maybe Jupiter is in Virgo. So there you've got an earth trine. And a trine facilitates energy, the flow of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the earth sign grounds it. So that would be one example.
Interesting. How would we know when we're in a trine?
That's the tricky part. You got to have astrology software.
Right. We want to know.
Actually, you can go on a website and see, these websites that list the ephemeris for, say, this year or 2020, for instance, and see which planets are going to be where, and if they're separated by 120 degrees, then that's a trine. Also, there's a sextile, which is a separation of 60 degrees, which would also facilitate, I think, telepathy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I just did a chart for a woman whose birth chart is just filled with trines. And I think she's probably I know she is. She's very intuitive. So often when you see in a birth chart people who have a lot of trines, that often suggests that it's a reward for something they've done in previous lives. And in this life, there's an easy flow of energy between the unconscious and the conscious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's something that we can further pursue. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I may have to do a post on that. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, I just have to get this sense that we are so. I mean, we're inextricably linked to Mother Earth, and the solar system and beyond, and so we know that there are certainly proven effects that the full moon, the lunar cycle, or particularly the full moon, as well as the new moon, have on us. So why wouldn't we be able to somehow harness certain alignments to use some of these things that we have embedded in us anyway? Telepathy is real.
Also, the lunar phases are important. A new moon would be a great time to try something new. The full moon tends to bring things to fruition, so that's a good time. The one time I probably wouldn't try it is when the moon is balsamic. It's called the dark moon, and that's right before the moon, bursts into the new moon cycle.
Uh-huh. I want you to do a post on this, would you?
Okay.
We'll send all the higher journeyers over to you. Do a post on this. Let me know. And I love your website. Awesome. We're going to talk about that later. Let's keep talking about phenomena, this great book. Now, listen, in this book, you guys cover the gamut of phenomena, obviously from hearing voices to receiving visions to precognition, remote viewing, out-of-body experience. The list is long. But one of my favorite areas you cover has to do with planetary empathy, or in describing some individuals as planetary empaths. And I knew, based on going to your website, I learned about it, and I've been kind of rocking that term. People are like, I've never heard of that. Well, you've got to go to this website and find out. So you guys brought that term, I think, to the masses. What is a planetary empath? Can you explain?
Planetary. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, planetary empaths are people who have physical reactions in advance of either natural or man-made disasters, and they come in. They're not happy things. They're not things that people like experiencing. They're
physical symptoms that they experience sometimes weeks or days before.
But it's not related to any physical problem that they have either, like hearing clicking sounds or
having nosebleeds, having abdominal pains that aren't related to anything that's really in your body.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not diseased, you're not, but they feel like they are.
Yeah, and the sounds they hear is a big factor, that the ringing. And it's not with people who have this problem normally, but it's something that comes up just before these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, some of them get nosebleeds. One woman gets migraines. I mean, the physical symptoms, there's a range of physical symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Dizziness, vertigo. I heard one of your...
Mm-hmm. Right. But the problem is that none of them, they say, all right, if I have... I feel like I'm burning up, then it's probably related to a volcanic eruption that's going to occur. But other than that, they can't
pinpoint what it is.
where it is or when it's going to happen.
It hasn't been that helpful.
It hasn't,
and even if
it makes their lives difficult.
And even if they could say, okay, there's going to be a terrorist attack in Paris because I felt this way, what could they do?
Who's going to believe them?
Yeah.
Right. I know that's frustrating for people that have precognition, and this is a very common thing. And I think that the big question everyone asks is, why am I being given this if I can't do anything about it? Well, maybe that's not the dynamic at play. Maybe we're just wired. We're just wired to the spectrum of experience. I mean, this is called the field. We can't not be wired to it. So it's not necessarily you're given this for that reason. You're just given it because you're a part of it. which is
That's a good point.
frustrating. It's frustrating for sure. Yeah.
It's especially frustrating to these people who experience this phenomena all the time, frequently, especially now the way the world is so crazy right now.
Yeah.
And it also related to this, not quite the same as planetary empaths, but psychic detectives, people who hear about a murder and they just get a picture of who it was and the whole circumstances of it. We interviewed a man years ago named George Hardy, who he saw this story on television and he just knew who the murderer was, and he just felt it was his duty to report it. Well, he became a suspect because he had so much detail that hadn't been reported. And they put him under sodium pentothal, some kind of concoction of drugs that we were talking to him like 15 years. It was a Boston Strangler case was the story, was the case. And we were talking to him 12, 15 years after that story was all over.
And he was still messed up.
Yeah, he was messed up from the drugs they had given him.
My goodness.
And, yeah. So,
all because he had a psychic
right.
proclivity in this. That's, you have to be careful.
And he felt obligated to report it to somebody.
Right.
My is that we need more scientists, say, working with these planetary empaths or working with psychic detectives, people who can really study the process and maybe with empaths to learn where, somehow direct them to where these events are going to occur. Kind of like Minority Report, except that was about crime. But,
that's a great idea. Oh my gosh. Well, I was going to ask the two of you, how widespread do you think this is in terms of being planetary empath? I mean, I know you've been looking at this for quite some time. Do you see it growing? Do you think this is something that's rare?
No, I don't think I think a lot of people experience symptoms, but they don't make the connection when the event happens. In other words, maybe they go to a doctor instead and say, oh my God, I've got this terrible stomach pain. And,
And then some people who are aware, like we have a friend who lives in Wales who's a psychic healer who's given us a number of these different stories related to the sensations, the sicknesses she's had before these experiences, before these tragedies. And she no longer has them because she says it's not good. She doesn't want to have these experiences.
Sure.
So she blocked because of the what it does to her body, what it does to her mind.
So planetary empaths, this is something I don't know that I realized. This is specifically having to do with those that are having physical symptoms related to something that's about to happen. Not just emotional?
Yeah, it's both emotional and physical. It seems to vary depending on the people. Like people, for instance, some of these empaths, they get depressed for no reason.
Like Connie would.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't know, okay, why am I feeling so down and I cry all the time? It's not because they're clinically depressed. There's something else. They're feeling something.
They're picking up on something.
And they're picking up on a tragedy.
Yeah.
But then they're also the ones who pick up on, the physical symptoms.
Right. That is quite the burden. That's quite a burden to carry. Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit more offline, but so many different nuggets here. I hope everyone goes and gets this book, Phenomena. We'll make sure we have a link for it. But listen, you cannot have a book about phenomena and not include, my journeyers love it, the UFO subject within its pages. And you certainly did not omit this. You both, I want to bring up something specifically. You've had so many memorable interactions, many, but one with the late Betty Hill, of course, known famously for her abduction along with her husband Barney, 1961, while driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire. It's a famous story. It's really set a precedent. Along with, also, he wasn't there, but ET contact regressionist, the late Bud Hopkins, both very well-known names in our field. Tell us about the interaction that you had with both of them and what that was like.
Yeah, it was interesting because we met them both at virtually the same time, the same
UFO
weekend.
conference.
It was a UFO conference in Hollywood, Florida that wasn't very well publicized or very well attended. There were probably under 100 people there.
But we were covering it for Omni magazine. Remember Omni?
Mm-hmm, sure do.
Yeah, it was a great magazine.
Science magazines that also had fiction science fiction stories in it, but it also had, right in the center of the magazine, it had several red pages about UFOs and the paranormal. And we worked for that section through one editor. So we were just starting out as freelancers, so it was great because they paid very well. Mm-hmm. And we were getting assignments, a lot of assignments. A lot of them they didn't publish. They just didn't have room for them. But we were paid 100% kill fee, which was great.
Mm. But that's how we met Betty and Barney. Right. They were both speakers at this.
Yeah, we were assigned to this UFO conference, and Bud Hopkins was there, Betty was there, and you can tell the Betty story better. you had a lot more to do with it.
Well, it was Betty. She was traveling with a friend of hers who was a nurse, and she gave her talk. It was really fascinating. Although she was a very nervous person, her eyes were always going towards the window. I kind of got the feeling with Betty that she was always looking for the UFOs.
And she seemed to be a chain smoker.
Yeah, she was also a chain smoker. But in fact, when she signed our book, she said, "Look at the skies." Anyway, we had them over for dinner during one of the nights of this conference, and Betty was just fascinated to talk to. I mean, she went through the whole thing about what had happened to Barney, and everything. And at one point, we walked outside. We lived at that time in a condo, and there was a big parking lot outside our condo. And we walked outside, and Betty looked up, and she goes, "Look, it's one of them." And it was the airplane lights. And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "But I thought that was an airplane light." She said, "They disguise themselves as whatever they want you to see." Now, who am I to say that sounds nuts? Because it didn't. This is the woman who, she and Barney basically set the marker for UFO abductions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she knew her stuff.
Yeah, she had a place in New Hampshire. She used to go out in this field and watch, and we knew somebody else, a psychiatrist, lived in Vero Beach, Florida. What was his name again?
Mike Levitt.
No.
No, I mean, he was the one.
Yeah, who?
Oh, shoot.
Oh, I can't think of his name right now.
Well, we'll think of it.
Yeah. And he studied Betty quite a bit, and he would go out to this field with her, and I remember asking him, "Well, did you see the lights? Did you see what she saw?" He said, "Yes, I saw the lights, but the question is, what were they?"
What were they?
That was the open question. I mean, he was seeing airplanes too, and some of them. So, but he did. She had this place where she went. She had this nurse friend who was with us, and they would go out to the field.
But abductions change people, and you can't. If somebody feels that they're seeing a UFO, you can't say, "Well, don't believe your own experience." See, that's part of what's wrong, I think, in terms of skepticism. Well, that's nuts, or you didn't really experience that. Well, yeah, I did.
Right. And again, it's not just about the observation, but the feeling. It seems like I wasn't there, obviously, in that parking lot where she said adamantly, well, they know how to cloak themselves to be whatever they want, which, right. But there's, after going through the experience that she was said to go through along with her husband, there's got to be this, they're attached to it, a feeling that
right.
she may not have been able to explain, but you know what you know. You just know what you know without having to explain it.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I know her.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say briefly, are you familiar with her niece, Kathleen Martin, who I know quite well?
Yeah, I don't know her, but I've seen her books.
Yeah, I should connect the two of you. Maybe we'll do that. We'll put you two together. Yeah, she's lovely, and she's also an experiencer. Very, very active with MUFON.
I figured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she's got a lot to tell. Yeah, we'll talk about that offline too. So, listen, let's move on because we don't have too much time left. The time has flown, as I am not surprised that it would do. I want to use throw this term out at you that you brought up a couple of times in your book, referring to the matrix of reality. You brought it up, I think, in the beginning of your book as it relates to a holographic model of reality, and one that I personally resonate with. I want to ask you, do you think both of you, that we are living in a sort of pre-configured universe? I mean, that all of what we experience in our reality, including the phenomena in our lives, may be quite literally already embedded within the fabric of reality, if it's a matrix?
That's a really interesting question. You know, Whitley Strieber asked us the same question.
Ah,
The Matrix.
Matrix, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it could be all hallucination, that a shared hallucination that we're all experiencing, that this reality is a projection from something else.
or it could just be we create our own reality, like Seth said.
YCYOR.
Yeah.
That's what he said. YCY. Okay.
Yeah.
What is your sense? What do you have a hunch?
My sense is that the Matrix is sort of what David Bohm described when he was talking about the implicate order.
Yes.
He said that everything unfolds from the implicate order, space, time, and the explicate or the unfolded order is what we see in our daily lives. So if you experience synchronicity, for instance, that's along the border between the implicate and the explicate. I also think that a lot of the paranormal exists along that border, including UFOs and aliens and, you know, all the things we've been talking about.
So in a sense, according to Bohm, we're living in a holographic universe.
Mm-hmm.
Michael
Talbot, of course. That's how I learned of Bohm's work. Yeah, interesting you use that term border. So I'm kind of getting this image of an in-between state where it's not, and I know Bohm is famous for his implicate and explicate order, the enfoldment and unfoldment of all things. But there is this in-between state that actually someone else that Talbot mentioned in his book, which is Itzhak Bentov, I believe, who wrote Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Really complex book. I got it. I don't think I ever finished it. But he goes into this idea where stuff is really happening in that in-between borderline state that cannot be physically measured. And yet so much could be unfolding from that, quote, space.
I remember that book too.
That was a great book.
That area, the borderline area, that's where synchronicities are, because they exist. They're meaningful coincidences. They exist outside of the normal sense of cause and effect. But so do
aliens. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I think the whole paranormal thing is there in that in between.
But when we're experience these meaningful coincidences, we're getting a peek to that the enfolded reality.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that UFO experience, you're getting a peak too.
Maybe so, because they
all of it, really.
Yeah,
I've never heard it explained this way. The two of you, once again, you're bringing up something in a way that I have not heard before. Borderlining, really sitting on the edge of something, and yet there's so much juice there. It's not fully enfolded nor unfolded. It's in an abyss, even.
It is like a borderline.
That's
a boundary.
Okay.
One of the things that Whitley Strieber always talks to us about is the relationship of the dead with the aliens, which is very interesting because there's two ways of looking at that subject. One is that they exist in other realities, other dimensions, where they move between dimensions, our dimension to the dimension of the dead, and that's why they can be seen with the dead sometimes. The other possibility is that they have the capacity to look into your mind, to see your dead loved ones, and to project that image through by transforming their own image to you. So you see this alien that appears as a
dead relative.
As a dead relative, and we know stories that are true. In one particular case, a woman was abducted after going to a UFO concert.
A rock concert.
Excuse me.
A UFO concert? That's a new one for me.
Yeah, a rock concert. And she was abducted afterwards. And she had many abductions previous to that, and she was just angry that she had just gone to this concert. Now she was in this ship, and the aliens were there, and one of them was the lead singer, Axl Rose. And she said, "What's he doing here?" And they said, "Well, we thought you liked him." And then the Axl Rose turned back into an alien.
Well, this is bringing up the whole idea of screen memory, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. And I'm going to be folding it a bit into my upcoming talk in Australia, because you can't escape that. Where is this being produced from? We know that oftentimes people will see animals in lieu of, instead of the actual physical, whatever the species is, whatever the being is. But is it emanating from our own consciousness? There's a confluence of the two. I mean, what's doing this? Why is it? I don't even expect you to answer, because I think that's a loaded question, but that's fascinating. And what Whitley talking about particularly, does he feel that, what about his thoughts about Anne? Because I know he's got constant streams of information coming that he feels is from Anne.
He also, after she died, they co-authored a book.
I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Afterlife Revolution, which I thought was a really interesting book. He says it's through meditation, that's his conduit to her.
His 3 a.m. meditation.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, she, I believe it was Anne, who a couple years ago told him to go to the town of Casadega, Florida, which is a spiritualist community north of Orlando. And so he wrote us and he said, "Hey, do you guys know about Casadega?" And at the time, we were just coming back from Casadega, where I'd been teaching an astrology workshop.
Yeah, we had just left.
We just left.
Probably we weren't a half an hour out of that town when he asked if we'd ever heard of it.
So there you go.
Let's meet there. So we met him and Peter Lavenda, who's also very knowledgeable about this stuff, in Casadega. And it was great. It was a lot of fun,
You wrote about that in the book, didn't you? You brought that up.
I think so,
yeah.
It's not in this book, in one of them.
No, I think in this one. It's fresh in my mind because I just read it. But
Okay.
Wow. I love Peter Lavenda's work as well. In fact, another offline story of hanging out with Whitley and Peter Lavenda a couple of years ago at Contact in the Desert. And Linda Moulton Howe, all of us. Having drinks and talking about God knows what. I just heard from Whitley yesterday. Yeah. We just communicated actually yesterday. So,
really?
Yeah. Oh, we'll talk about that offline too. So much to catch up on. But oh boy, I want to go back to the borderline just for a hot minute before we leave, because this is, I think, out of everything, this is something that's really juicy to me. If all of these experiences, or a great deal of them, somehow hang on the cliff, let's call it, of that border, that edge of reality and unreality, wouldn't we assume that we do as well at some level?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, what our book Phenomena is about, all that encompasses the unknown realities, the paranormal mysteries of the unknown, UFOs, ghosts, because it's a part of our DNA. It's as spiritual beings in a physical world. So essentially, we come from that world. We are spiritual beings, and this is a projection into the physical world. We're on the other side as well right now.
Sure. Yeah. And I've heard of people that have experienced, sort of, we could call it, I don't know if you would call that bilocation as much as just having a sense of, actually, I think I heard from someone not that long ago that had written to me about that very odd sense that they were being spoken to by a counterpart of themselves while in the meditative state. Frightened the heck out of her. Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So many mysteries.
Well, Joe McMoneagle, who was part of the Stargate program, one of the things he said was that when he remote views, what he feels happens is that another part of himself, the future part, or whatever, whatever he would term that, is the one who gives him the information, and that's why he in the present is able to be so accurate. In a sense, it's like what you're talking about, bilocating, except that, he's talking about his future self, a future version of himself.
That's what he said, really. That was part of he felt that was part of the dynamic of his remote viewing, that he was in touch with another aspect of him. That's interesting.
Another aspect of himself. But now, then I wonder about this, though, because he did a remote view of Mars 1 million years in the past. So, and he gave very specific things about what he saw and, the beings he saw. So that couldn't be Joe from the future. Could it?
Well,
or I don't know. I mean, the way Joe works just fascinates me. He's so. You give him a target, it's in an envelope. He never sees what's in the envelope, and he just starts sketching and talking.
Yeah, he's done some incredible things, but he's not always right too. Like we got trapped on an island in the Bahamas with him and Scooter's wife, Nancy McMonigle, and he was certain that there was no hurricane coming. And but Trish, she was really, we know a lot about hurricanes living down here, and so
Also from my book.
yeah, and Trish was certain that just the opposite of what Joe was saying, that it was going to hit us, and it did. And
I kept saying, well, we have to go get supplies. We need paper towels. We need water.
Yeah.
No, we didn't have any. We couldn't flush the toilets. We had to go down to the ocean with a bucket.
Oh my gosh!
Blasted by big waves, coming back with a bucket of salt water
so you can flush the toilet.
So completely soaked, from the waves, and just to flush the. And we had to be rescued. Basically, the road in parts was over 6 feet deep of water.
Oh my gosh!
And, you couldn't drive out of there. And so this huge truck came along and got us out of there. And we got to the airport just in time to make our airplane. And there was only one strip that wasn't underwater, so the airplane was able to take off.
And you were with Joe and his wife at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, what good was he then? I'm kidding. We know, obviously, he's the guru. He and Ingo Swann of remote viewing. My goodness. So, so I have such reverence for both of them. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Well, listen, folks, we're going to have to wind this down. We actually went a little over, but well worth it. We're talking about all things paranormal. We're talking about phenomena. And speaking of that aptly titled book, where can people get it? And they can get it right now, right?
Yeah, it's available anywhere online now, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And hopefully, I think the print book is coming out.
And the audio book as well.
Yeah, the audio.
And the audio book. Okay, fantastic.
Right now it's an ebook, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Right now it's just an ebook.
So you can go get it and get it immediately, folks. And I would definitely suggest doing that. As well as, can they click through to from your website as well? So
no, we don't have any capacity to take credit cards.
Yeah, they can't buy.
Yeah.
But I mean, is there a link that will take them? I'm trying to get them to go to your.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get them to go to your website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a link on the website.
There you go. That's all.
Yeah.
Tell us what the website is.
Yeah.
It's blog.synchrosecrets.com.
There you go. Blog.synchrosecrets.
SYNCHRO secrets.
There's an entire archive of strange stories
I
that
know
go
there
back 9 years.
And one coming that you promised you'd write for us, right?
Yes.
Think about that.
Actually, I like this borderline thing you suggested. This is really interesting.
Let's talk about that. Maybe we can brainstorm something together. You never know. That's fascinating. Yeah. Well, listen, you're both fascinating, by the way, Rob and Trish, the dynamic duo. I mean that. I was listening to the interview that we did 3 years ago, and I think I called you that then. And it's so funny because when I was sort of working up the intro, it just came to me again, and I'm like, I think I said that before. Lo and behold, I listened to the show, and I did. And so I mean that. It's great. The two of you, how long have you been married?
35 years.
You're the pause.
It's 36.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Actually, yeah, you're in trouble, Rob. Okay. Yeah, 36.
Beautiful. Well,
long time.
Here's to another 36 or heck, another 50. So we can see more.
Great host too. Thank you, Alexa.
Say again.
You're a great hostess.
Oh well,
So,
it's easy when I've got friends that I'm chatting about stuff that I love to talk about the most. So, but thank you, I do appreciate it.
You're so knowledgeable. That's what I love. I mean,
it's fun. It's fun. It's
fun. You know about stalking the pendulum.
Stalking the wild pendulum. Let's go look that book up. Yeah. That's another great book I'd recommend for sure. So listen, I'm going to say goodbye for now. I don't want the two of you to hang up because we've got a few items to check off the list before we hang up. But
Yes.
I am going to say thank you to the journeyers as always for checking in with us. Listen, I'm going to also remind you, if you like this show, you know what to do. If you haven't done it already, please subscribe. It does support the work that we're doing here at Higher Journeys. It enables us to keep the information coming to you. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, as well as hit that like button, only if you liked it, and comment, because I get such great feedback from you and your stories. That's huge. You're a part of this journey. So please, let's be proactive and get involved in the community of Higher Journeys. All right, guys, as always, we thank you for joining us on this incredible journey we call Higher Journeys. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.